Hello, everybody. Hopefully you all can hear me. I think we're going to wait a couple of minutes before we get started in earnest because folks like to filter in, but we're going to get started in just a minute. Thank you all so much for being here. This is personally the first webinar I've ever done, so I'm very excited. And be nice to me. Just show of hands, everybody here. I assume not everybody is already an AppTweak client. If you're using AppTweak, say something in the chat. Tell us where you're calling in from or chatting in from, and what you're working on, what company you belong to, if that's something you're comfortable with. Wow, I'm seeing a lot of folks from all over. Hi, everybody. Let's give it another little bit of time, and then I'll get started. Also, I wouldn't be too concerned if you aren't exactly right on time. We are going to be sending this recording out to everybody who pre-registered, so hopefully, well, if you're seeing this, you're on time. Everybody else. Okay. I think we're ready to get started. So let's talk about some tips to optimize your creatives beyond A/B testing. For the purposes of this webinar, I plan on going over things that may be pretty familiar to those of you who have been doing creative testing for a long time in mobile games or in the app space more generally. But I'm really hoping that no matter what level you are at when it comes to ASO knowledge, you'll be able to gain something from this webinar. So if you've never done this before and you're shooting blind, don't worry about it. This is going to be some intro stuff for you as well. But if you are more experienced and you're really looking to push the envelope, I'm really hoping to show you guys something too. So let's get started. I know I've already asked, but how many of you are already AppTweak customers? I have to ask because I was an AppTweak customer before I joined the team, and I personally think it is the most powerful ASO tool on the market. It's amazing. It's only gotten better and better since I joined last June, and we are now Apple Search Ads partners officially. So we are a great resource for you and your companies to get insights on the market, understand your competitors, understand your own performance, and find ASO tactics that will work for you. And don't worry if you're not already an AppTweak customer, there will be a link available later, so you can book a demo or a call with us for more information. So don't worry about that. We've got you covered. A little bit more about AppTweak. This is just some of the things that we are doing. If I had put this graphic together myself, I would have put an emphasis on snooping on your competitors because it's my personal favorite thing to do, or it was when I was on the client side working for a mobile games company. It's super powerful, and it's really just a one-stop shop for everything you need to have an excellent store performance. So if any of this seems like interesting, tidbits to you, please do follow up with us. We'd love to tell you all about it. And these are just a few of our esteemed clients, the ones that have let us use their logos for this marketing slide. I've worked with a couple on this slide in specific, and I'm really excited to hopefully have some of them here on the call. Hello. And give them some more insights and treat all of you as if you were my client for the day with my insights. A little bit about me. I'm Elizabeth Devine. I'm an app growth consultant and the creative optimization specialist for the app growth consultant team at AppTweak. What that basically means is that I'm part of the team that does projects for our clients and is there to provide ASO expertise and support for all of our client accounts, at least at the enterprise level. And I was doing ASO for over 8 years before I joined up here. It'll be 9 years next month. Who am I? So I've been doing this for a while. there weren't tools like AppTweak back when I was just getting started that were available to me. I know AppTweak's been around, but I hadn't had access to it. But having worked with AppTweak, it really changed the game for me. And when it came time to search for another job, I knew that this was the place I wanted to be because it is such an excellent tool. So hopefully you trust me and my expertise. And as we start to get into the actual content of this webinar, please do drop any of your questions in the chat. I'm not going to be pausing to answer questions as we go through, but I've got some moderators, colleagues that are here with me that are going to be flagging them for me. So when we get to the end of the slides, I will definitely have time to go over your questions, and please let me at them. So if you're doing optimizations already, you probably think of ASO as, at the very least, something you do to your keywords to mobile SEO your app into a better visibility advantaged perspective. I think that's a bit simplistic. I, being a creative optimization specialist, say that it's so much more than that. But doing creative optimizations is mostly helpful within specific frameworks. So when do you want to optimize your creatives? The number one reason people start to optimize their creatives is when they want to see a lift in their conversion rate. I may call that CVR also, interchangeable. You may also want to try to target organic impressions that are not specific to keywords. So you've got your search impressions, but then you've got your explore and browse impressions. Those are when you are on your device and you're scrolling to the bottom of an app store listing and they say, you like this app, you might also like these apps. Or, you know, featuring, that counts as explore or browse impressions depending on the platform. And there are creative optimizations you can make that will specifically target the impression rates and conversion rates for those placements. Other things that might be of interest are, if you're rolling out something really big within your product, you might want to see how it will impact the store or what user response might be if you are not quite sure about how you're going to roll it out yet within your game. So I've seen clients and have personally done A/B tests where we've got several different UI updates. Things are just shuffled around a little bit. Maybe this menu's here, maybe this is a little bit bigger there. And we get a sense and immediately based on the data of the conversions on the test, which one is the most visually impactful for our user base. So that's pretty cool. And of course, if you've got new game mechanics, characters, levels, something new and interesting on the content side of your game, it's always good to throw that into some sort of creative test as well, see if they have an impact on your store metrics, especially if you've noticed they've already had an impact on your in-game playing and retention metrics. If it works for people who are already invested in your game, it's probably going to draw in new people as well. Whew. So let's get a little bit more specific from here. If you're going for organic impressions, you should test your icon. And this is especially true on Google Play because, as you can see from these little screen grabs I pulled from AppTweak, when we have our live search function, you'll be able to see an actual device style view of what is currently live in the store. So that's where I pulled these from. I just searched for puzzle games and this is what came up. So for Google Play, you can see that the creative that you see when you are looking at search results, at least for now, because we know that they're A/B testing themselves at Google, the main creative placement that you get is your game icon. And this is something that you can change dynamically and A/B test on the store, and it has a big impact. If you are already in the top 5 or 6 for a specific keyword and you change your icon, it can also have an impact on your search rankings, because if you're in that first snapshot and your icon suddenly more compelling, more people are going to click on it. which means you're getting more conversions for that specific keyword, which means you're going to see a lift in your search rankings. Super awesome. This is less important for the App Store, only because we also see the video if it's present, and then up to the first 3 screenshots if there is no video. Now, in this example, both of the apps that are shown on the App Store are using portrait-only creatives. But for a lot of us, our games are already in landscape orientation mode. That means people are holding their devices like this while playing them, not like this. And that's important to keep in mind when you're optimizing for the store, because having your screenshots going in one direction or another may be a better way to present your game, even if it's not exactly optimal for the store. We'll get into more of that later. But is there something else that you think you should be testing around? Drop it in the chat and I will get back to it as soon as I can. So I'm going to be talking a lot about the first impression. I'm not sure who coined this term, but we use it a lot at AppTweak. And what I mean by that is when a user is organically finding your app through search, through a UA campaign, through an influencer referral link, whatever it may be. If they land on your app, what is the sum total of what they are able to see without touching their screen at all? And how impactful is it? So these are device previews that are available again on AppTweak. This is one of my favorite little features that not enough people know about, because you can actually upload your intended creatives and see how they look within this context. So you get a little preview of how much is visible. Super helpful. But I always also recommend keeping devices with you. If you have a test device from each platform, that is ideal, especially if you have data on which devices are the most popular for your best players. Having a test device of that same type gives you a much better chance of seeing exactly what that experience is like from the very top of the funnel all the way down to retained spending player, ideally. So when you're looking at your first impression, you can see it's way different on the Google Play Store from the App Store. Google Play gives you much more space below the creatives. In this case, we've got a landscape video. If there is no landscape video, then you see screenshots. If it's a landscape screenshot, it'll show up big and bold. If it's portrait screenshots, they're going to be little bitty, but they're going to take up the same vertical space as the landscape ones. This is a little bit different on iOS. Portrait shows much more vertical space on iOS devices. Landscape gives you more horizontal space, of course, but they're optimized for different experiences. If you have a game that's already played in portrait mode, you'll probably want to stick to portrait mode unless you can think of a creative way to utilize the landscape layout to show multiple instances of your gameplay, for example. But what you want to keep in mind is how clear is the value proposition? Is it clear at first glance what this game is actually about? What kind of game it is? Is it easy enough to read? If there's text, is the text big enough? Is it high contrast enough? And you have to think about it as your most vision impaired possible customer looking at their phone at least an arm's length away. If you can read and decipher what's going on in your store listing, screenshots, videos, thumbnails, whatever you've got there, icon too, from an arm's length away on a small screen of a device, you are in great shape. And making optimizations to become more readable usually results in about a 3 to 5% lift in conversion rates immediately. If you haven't already tested that, that would be my #1 recommendation. So you're about to go into your test and you're ready to go. You think, let's go over some things that I consider best practices for preparing for a test. For one thing, you need to have a clear hypothesis, and this can be a bit tricky. Sometimes a hypothesis is something very general, like if I update my store creatives to match the season going into November, December for the Christmas holiday season, that will convert better than if we leave it alone. And this might mean changing your icon, your screenshots, your graphics, everything top to bottom, videos, all of it, all at once. But it's still a singular, clear hypothesis, even though you're changing a lot of things. If the hypothesis is more focused, such as I think my text needs to be bigger so that it's more readable, that's a much more narrow hypothesis, but it's still very clear. You go into your test with something specific in mind. So I pulled these two examples from the many games that you can access on AppTweak. The first one is from WordZen. This is the seasonal icons that they were testing out back in December. And the other, the screenshot test is from Triviastar. And this is their first two screenshots on iOS. And I'm curious, can you, watching now, deduce what you think the hypothesis was for these tests? And can you predict which version was the most successful based on your impression of these creatives side by side? I'll give you a second. Wipe my nose. So it's sort of a trick question when it comes to the WordZen icons, because the reality is that the baseline was the icon that was kept. If I were to take a guess at their hypothesis, it was, let's try introducing wintry themed elements to our icon to see if that performs better going into winter. But looking at it on my screen in front of me, it's bigger than it would appear on a device. And yet that top one is the most readable. It's got the most contrast. It's very clear. The blue within the word letters are a little bit more saturated. They pop better because they don't have any snow on top of them to draw the attention away. And there's a snowman in version B and a tree in version C, but they do sort of obscure what you're seeing within the icon. So I probably would have guessed that B performed the best, just because the snowman gives the most contrast, adds the most visual interest, and I think, personally, conveys the winter theme best. But it turns out changing their icon for the winter was not what was right for them, so they kept their original icon. Now, for the Triviastar hypothesis, my best guess is that the questions that were changed out were trying to be a bit refreshed and more relevant. Olaf from Frozen and The Rock from WWE, WWF, they feel maybe a little bit dated in comparison to these other questions, which feel more nostalgic. So a question about Queen, who is the artist who did Bohemian Rhapsody, that could have been seasonal when there was like a movie that had just come out. But in general, Queen never goes out of style. Same thing with Looney Tunes. Looney Tunes has been around for decades. It has never really been out of style. It's an IP that is recognizable, that people resonate with, either in a nostalgic way or in a current and modern way. So it's a very smart test. And they did, in fact, apply the B variation, which makes me think that those were indeed stronger questions to show within their first impression. So let's keep going on the best practices front. How do you test based on the hypothesis you are looking at? I generally say test one hypothesis at a time. This is, the scientific method. We want to rule out variables. If you are testing out seasonality and landscape versus portrait and character versus character and text at the top of the screenshot versus the bottom of the screenshot and a new video all at the same time, even if it works and your conversion rate goes up, you're not going to know what moved the needle. So it's better to do this in isolation. Have one hypothesis per test. This is pretty important. Keep your target audience in mind is another one. So we already talked about the differences between Google Play Store and the App Store pages. It also comes down to your target audience. Are you marketing specifically to young adults? Are you marketing specifically to older millennials? Are you looking at the elderly specifically? These different subsets of people are going to be drawn to different visual elements. And especially if you are localized into different languages, try to look around at what companies who are based in that country of origin are doing for their apps. If there's an app in a similar genre, similar space to you, you know, another RPG, another puzzle game, another slot machine, whatever it may be, and it's developed in the country that you're targeting, see how they're advertising their app. As you can see here, we've got the American US English set up at the top. It's portrait orientation. The text at the bottom. It's very character and gameplay focused. But for Japan, they went with a different method. They changed it out to be landscape orientation. The characters are flanking on either side of each screenshot, so still present, but used in a different way. And there's no banner containing the text. The text is all over, and it's very, you know, brightly colored with big, thick strokes around it to make it readable, even at a small size. So this is them taking best practices for their country into consideration. And then the biggest mistake that I see my clients make regularly is that they don't leave their A/B tests going long enough. And this applies for every type of test, whether they're using the Google Play Store or some of the other methods that I'm going to get into later. You need to leave your game test up for at least 7 days. When you think about your performance metrics, you probably see peaks and valleys on a weekly basis. There's tons of cyclical data that we just come across in this industry. People play at certain times. They're also browsing at certain times. And so if you're running a test for 24 hours on a weekday, it's not going to give you a sense of how it would perform over a weekend. And you really need to account for that level of variance throughout the week, at least, to get statistical relevancy. Some folks say that 3 days is the minimum. I would really like to stress 7 days because of the cyclical weekly nature of games. But if it looks like it's already hurting your metrics within 3 days, at least you've given it 3 days and you can stop the test traffic from there. So how do you decide what tool to use? I think most of us are probably familiar with the platform A/B test tools, specifically Google Play Experiments and the App Store Connect product page optimization page. They are a little bit different in terms of what you can test and how you can test it. But those best practices that we've already gone over apply equally to both platforms. So when is this the right way to go? For one thing, whatever you're trying to test has to be something that is allowed to be tested on these platforms. So if you're trying to get a sense of whether your app's title would be better off shorter, you can't A/B test that here. You can't A/B test that on the App Store or the Google Play Store. So you'll need to find another method. But if you're talking about will having a video impact your first impression in a positive way or a negative way, that kind of test you can absolutely run here. And the bigger the swing, the more likely this is to give you decisive data. So what I mean by that is if you're changing only your 4th and 5th screenshots out of 5 to 10 screenshots, you're probably not going to see an impact within this test framework. This test framework is best for things like your icon is completely different from your other icon, or you are trying a different feature graphic, or in the case of iOS optimizations, poster frame for your current video, because you feel the video is performing, but maybe the thumbnail that's being used is not performing the way you would like it to. Those sorts of big tests that impact your first impression are the most likely to have the most conclusive results here. You also need a high volume of traffic to wherever you're going. So if you are testing on a game that's not getting any spend, it's not really a supported game, you can get some initial learnings, but you probably won't get anything super conclusive because you're just not getting enough traffic velocity. Now, you can also, send more traffic to those games to make this more viable, but results will vary because you are sending them to an untested store listing page in order to get that data. So it really depends on whether you and your UA team feel comfortable with that enough to prioritize it. The other thing to keep in mind is that both of these platforms have very specific set measurement values, and we're going to talk about more about MDE, CL, many acronyms on a later slide. But if you want to test too many things at once, you want a lower confidence level than they will allow, under 90%. Or you've run a test already and the results are just not conclusive. You're not sure what to do after running for, a month or more, then maybe a different method is right for you. So I have seen a lot of game companies in particular run swap tests. And I'm not sure if this is a term that is like coined within the industry. This is what I use to describe this type of test. It's anything that you don't test on another, platform tool in advance. You just have a hunch, you make your hypothesis, you get the creatives made, and you, boom, put them out. Live change is another term that I hear a lot of people use for this. And it has some pros and cons. Pros include really fast data. This goes out to 100% of your users automatically if you're not using custom product pages or custom store listings at least. It comes like all traffic is directed to it. It's very clear data right from the get-go. And at least for Google Play, it's very easy to reverse. If it looks like your data is trending negative and you want to reverse things, you'll already have everything you need to just resubmit and go. It's a little bit harder for the App Store, which is one of the drawbacks, because every time you update your metadata for the App Store, you have to submit a new build. Sometimes there are companies I know who like to set up metadata-only safety builds when they run this kind of test, so that if it does go particularly negative, they can immediately swap in a new build, the version number is increased, but the actual game content is identical, and then they get the creative changed out as fast as possible. You can also only test one version at a time. So with the platform's A/B test framework, it's up to 3 variations plus the baseline. Here, it's only 1-to-1. So if you've got one thing that you want to test against another one thing, it's great. But if you want to test 2 different options, you'd have to do what the Candy Crush team is doing here, which I don't know how well you can see that timeline up at the top, but those are a lot of little green dots, and every single one of them is associated with a screenshot order change. I would say this is not statistically relevant data. I don't really know what was going on with them internally, but it is an interesting use case. Very interesting to look at that and try to figure out what's going on. And if you're a competitor of Candy Crush's, maybe this is something you want to try and learn from. The other thing is that you don't have control over specific traffic proportions here. So if you are running user acquisition spend on multiple networks, you've got AppLovin and Unity ads and the Meta Suite and TikTok all running at the same time, and 1 or 2 of those has a negative influence based on whatever change you are at, but the other ones are positive, you can't just swap it out unless you create a custom product page. So that's a little bit more challenging. And you also don't have any clear statistical data comparisons unless you're using something like AppTweak. So we do come in handy in this case. Custom product pages and store listings are kind of the new frontier, in my opinion. They're extremely powerful, especially if you are running user acquisition spend. So the way that this works is you can choose as many variants as you want. You can pause them out as soon as they're not performing up to standards. There's easy to understand data coming from your MMP and whatever, platform or network you are running the ads on. And the more you spend, the faster you can learn. So it's less risky overall. It is more expensive, but you can learn a lot really fast. Some other fringe benefits is that this is the only place on Google Play, at least, that you can change your display title. And this is one of those things where, because of the length of your display name, it can either appear as 1 or 2 lines on a device. And so being able to test what impact that has on your first impression and conversions is really valuable. And this is the only way you can do it. You can also, integrate with a platform tool like AppTweak to see exactly how much this is impacting all of your different traffic sources. You can test this stuff at a much more granular level and hopefully get some very specific lifts in specific areas that holistically and incrementally form a great UA and ASO strategy. So let's talk very briefly about confidence intervals and statistical relevance. I was not a data science major. I had to take a class on this a couple years ago, and it really changed the way I do tests. So if you're not already into statistics, I highly recommend looking into that. But basically, when you are calculating the results of your test, you can do what the platforms are doing, but manually. And actually, our head of ASO, Simon, has created this wonderful document that we use internally where we can input our clients' numbers and give them a confidence interval for the test that they are running outside of the traditional A/B tests, or take the data from the traditional A/B tests, but then change the confidence level. If they're running it at 98, would it be better run at 90%? Would it give us more decisive results if that were the case? Or, it's the minimum detectable effect. People also call it like, sorry, I'm just going to skip that. Statistical relevance and significance, that's what it is, also known as the minimum detectable effect. The number is either big or small. You can control that very little. Within the App Store, we've got 2 examples here from each store of what that looks like. But you can't change that once the test is running. If you want to change that, you would have to go in, stop the test, and restart the test with those new levels. But you can, if you understand statistics, calculate this on your own. So this is basically just a litmus test. How reliable is the data you're getting? Is it statistically significant? Is it going to be impactful? And how confident are you in that sort of data? And here is my favorite slide. How do you measure those results with confidence? So I've already hinted a little bit about AppTweak's Reporting Studio. We just introduced a new feature on incrementality, which for the statistic nerds out there is chef's kiss beautiful, so much fun to work with, so much fun to play around with. And it gives you a sense of, given a specific number of days of data that you have complete, what is a projection you would anticipate that data would continue to follow? And how is it different from the reality of your data once that fills in? Very cool forecasting tool. Here we have just a little snapshot of the regular Reporting Studio. This is actually in reference to a trivia game that had 2 changes over this period. And you can see that the first change, immediately their installs go up. This seems to have been a very positive change. But after the second change, their installs start to decline. We don't have data because this is essentially a competitor insight. They're not integrated with us, and if they were, we couldn't show you their data. But based on our estimates, this is what we're seeing. So if you wanted to understand how one of your competitors' tests performed in order to make a hypothesis on what you should test yourself, using a tool like this would be really, really impactful. So if you see something very clear right off the bat, installs go up, conversion rate goes up, search rankings go up, you know you've got a positive test result, and that's really wonderful. But if it's not as clear, there are some other things you should be looking out for, namely, is conversion rate even your target KPI? You know, we talked about how icon tests can impact things like explore traffic. If you're testing a new icon, maybe your conversion rate doesn't go up, but maybe your organic explore/browse impressions go up. And if those go up, then is there something you can do to bring the conversion rate up for that segment as well? You can also break things out by traffic source. So assuming you're not using the CSL custom product page method, you would be applying things to your default product page. And if that's the case, it's really important to pay attention to all of your different traffic sources so that no matter where users are coming from on that funnel, you know that you're capturing them to the best of your abilities. And maybe there is a specific UA channel that is much more impactful and valuable overall. And so it's worth it to optimize for that channel over organics or a different channel. But you can still use the custom product pages and custom store listings to try to optimize better for those channels specifically and just send traffic to them in a different way. So definitely compare your pre-test and post-test metrics. Try to run these tests in isolation if you can. I know firsthand how hard it can be to work with this framework, and then meanwhile your product team is trying to push releases, and you know the QA team is releasing bug fixes, and your UA team paused spend on 3 different platforms or something. So all of a sudden your numbers are a little weird, but you can still measure the impact relative to whatever else is going on if you have a data source integrated with a tool like AppTweak, and it's actually really easy to do so. So if this is of interest to you, please definitely look out for the link to set up a demo with us. This is, again, one of the things that I love the most as somebody who used to be in your shoes working at a game company as the ASO manager. So this is amazing. Oh, just saw a little pop-up. That's awesome. So that is all the slides I have. I'm going to start taking some questions, and my teammates have flagged a couple for me already. So let's get started on those. First question I'm seeing is, what do you recommend if you have too little traffic to have reliable results with A/B tests? This is a really great question. I think that the swap test or the live change test is probably going to have the most impact for you, especially if you can control and have an extra build ready for iOS just in case whatever you're changing doesn't give you the best results. I know that saying things like just increase your spend is really unhelpful because a lot of teams just don't have that kind of independence. They have a lot of oversight. They have strict budgets and strict rules about how and where they can spend. So my best recommendation for increasing your traffic, if you are stuck with running A/B tests and you can't spend, is to try and find some inbound link traffic. So this could be things like reaching out to influencers who are popular within your gaming space and seeing if they would be willing to promote your app on a one-time basis or something like that. You can also, ask your team if it's a very small team, especially if you are an indie developer working on mobile games. More power to you. Love that. I've been in that spot, and one thing that I used to do was post on my social networks and say, hey guys, come check out this new game that I'm working on. And then, the 40 or so people who actually care enough about my posts to look at them might engage with that. And even that gives it a little bit of a traffic boost. The more traffic you can get, the better, obviously. But if it's at a trickle, I definitely think the swap test is probably right for you. Another question I got is, what kind of updates do you find usually have the biggest uplift? This is the secret sauce, isn't it? It's all having to do with that first impression. So for me, experientially and anecdotally, I would say that icons have the biggest impact, especially if you have a lot of Google Play traffic and are trying to optimize for organics. When I was just getting started in ASO, my boss, who was the head of product at the company I was working at, said, hey, I don't want you testing on our important games. Here is a less important game. Go ham. And I immediately decided I wanted to push the envelope, change the icon, and be a little edgy with it. I put a lot of text in there, and it was a slot game icon. So I tested out like win jackpots or 100 million starting coins or get 100 million coins free, back when this was allowed. Of course, this is not allowed anymore. But it took this very unimportant game that got no traction and made it one of our best performing games based on organic lift alone. So I know that icons can have a massive impact, especially if you are trying to grow with organics. Videos, I would say, are the other big one. They autoplay for iOS users, especially if they are already on Wi-Fi. So having a very impactful video as that first impression, auto playing in the results of any search queries, and with a very strong poster frame. So if you haven't got a video already, I would recommend testing no video versus one video with 3 different poster frames within that A/B test framework. Or you can just keep it fast, keep it simple, test video versus no video, but definitely pay attention to what the poster frame is when it's assigned to you. Or for Google Play, since it's redirecting to a YouTube link, you're going to want to look at your YouTube metrics as well as your Google Play Store metrics. And you're going to want to pay attention to the feature graphic, because that's what's going to show as the thumbnail. So either a combo test or a there versus not there test, I would say, are probably the biggest uplift. Let's see if the moderators have any other particular questions they want to flag for me. Nina asks, do you have any idea how Apple features apps in the Today tab and other categories? This is a bit of a mystery. Apple is very particular. They have a very high standard for the taste level of what's being shown. They look for things that are making waves within the industry, doing something new that nobody else is doing. They need to be visually beautiful and interesting. So having a really nice store listing definitely goes a long way to helping with that, but also having great in-game imagery. And they love virality. So if you're already getting a sudden burst of traffic because your game has gone viral to a certain extent, they're more likely to feature you in the Today tab. There is also a way you can submit yourself to be featured, but definitely make sure that you are doing this when you feel you are ready. So if there's a part of your store listing that is under optimized for whatever reason, make sure that you get this fine-tuned before you submit yourself, because you want to put your best foot forward. And then you cross your fingers and you contact your Apple reps if you got one, because maybe they can help out. But it is a very rare and wonderful thing to be featured on the Today tab. And there's no like easy answer to that question, I guess. So I hope that helps. Let's see. Would you recommend more defined sample, for example, only one country but smaller, or a bigger sample, less defined, multiple languages and countries? Ooh, hitting me with the hardball questions. Let's see. Contextually, it really depends on your team's goals. Like, if you are specifically trying to grow your app in a specific country, let's say it's Japan, you've heard that a competitor game that is really, really popular in Japan is doing amazing things, and you want to try and learn from their optimizations. Definitely go with just Japan. you know? If you're trying to do something that is a more holistic change, something that you assume would be sort of like a quality of life update for your store, definitely keep it broader. But whenever possible, if you're seeing traction within a specific geography or a specific language, investing in it more by running A/B tests is a great way to figure out if this is a viable, target for a larger discussion. Does the product team want to invest in localizing in this particular segment? Or is it worth spending money to try some user acquisition in this specific segment? So, a lot of places in the world having, English or no text would be the most optimal thing. And for some, it's not. And you really just have to test that on a case-by-case basis. But whenever you can be more specific to get a specific result, I do recommend it, as long as it doesn't conflict with any of the other things that we've already discussed. It doesn't make the traffic too slow or, mess with the statistical relevancy. Looks like we have another question. We often get negative trend results when we test screenshots on the Play Store, especially for France, and I believe GB is Great Britain. While we're still finding winnings in other countries, do you have any recommendations on how we can use AppTweak to find better hypotheses for those countries? Yes. Ooh, I'm so glad you asked. So if you are already an AppTweak customer, you have access to a new feature that we've rolled out in a couple months ago, I think, called the Screenshot Library. And this is one of my personal favorite updates. As the creative optimizations expert, I got to weigh in on this quite a bit. This is under the ASO Insights. What do we actually call it? Let me tell you how to navigate there. I've got it up in another tab. But basically, it uses AI to look at a body of screenshots that have something in common. So if you are looking at puzzle games, you could refine by the countries that you're trying to target, and you could look up puzzles. And regardless of the app DNA, category information, whatever, if our AI detects puzzles within the creative, it will show you that creative, and you can get context on where it is within the screenshots, who the publisher is. You can just tab over to look at the app listing more specifically. But yeah, so this is in the Store Explorer section under ASO Creatives Explorer, and it's called the Screenshot Library. Right now it's got a little new flag on it, which I don't know when that's going away, but it's really, thank you so much. My teammates have just shared the link. Super helpful. This is a great way, and you can look up trends in different countries' ways of presenting things. You might find that they're all using a different language than you expected, especially for France. I would not be surprised if the language used or the way that it's used would be significantly different. For the UK, I would assume maybe it could be a matter of semantics. I worked on slot games for a long time, so I was confused for the longest time about why my metadata didn't go over well in Australia. And it turns out they call them pokies, or poker games. I'd never heard that before, but if I'd had this wonderful tool at the time, I could have searched for slots. The AI would have found it, and then I would have seen all the creatives for Australia say pokies and poker games. The more you know. Another question for Google Play: what confidence interval do you typically consider acceptable when applying new variants? I personally like to wait until something is statistically significant, so at least 10 days, and shows a range that is entirely in the green for best results. Confidence level, it really depends on how big of a swing you're taking. And how confident you are in your hypothesis. For the longest time, I didn't have the ability to change that out. This was defaulted for the longest time at 90% confidence interval. So with the confidence level at 90%, I was doing just fine. And it does give you faster results because it's less confident. You just have to take it with a grain of salt. Is this that 1 in 10 that is incorrect in its supposition? And sometimes that just means it falls outside of that level, but it's still positive, or it's just not as impactful as you thought it would be. But yeah, I personally usually go with 90 unless I'm testing something that's pretty precarious, like an overhaul, something that drastically changes that first impression. Then I would go for, 95 or 98. 99 is too much, though. I don't think anybody really can ever be 99% confident in anything, right? Do you have any recommendations for creatives on Google Play featuring? Yes. I think more people should be using the in-app events framework for Google Play. Having good quality in-app events with compelling visuals and unique live ops surfaced within the Google Play Store has had a massive impact for the clients that I've recommended this to. If you're running live events and you're running custom store listings and you're utilizing all of Google's tools at the same time, they're more likely, in my opinion, to take notice and give you good placement and featuring. So the better you can perform with all of those things aligned, the more likely you are to be featured. And sometimes those features can just have a massive impact, like especially when it comes to events. There are a lot of places where the Google Play Store is now pushing games that have events going. So having something that is compelling from a user standpoint and visually going on in a live event is definitely going to be an impactful thing for you. Let's see if I'm missing any other questions. And I suppose I could wrap this up a little early, give you all back 10 minutes of your time, but I wanted to make sure that we had enough time for questions. So if there's anything you want me to go through that was already gone over on a previous slide, I can absolutely go back and do that as well. Let's see. Do you recommend running icon tests separately for iOS, or do you usually test them on Google Play first and then apply the results to iOS? iOS, you can test app icons, but it does involve developer effort because they make you integrate it within the build in order to access it for the store. So it's a little bit harder, but I've seen clients and have experienced myself on the game side. I've seen it where the two audiences resonate with different icon layouts. So assuming that what works on Google Play is going to work on iOS is kind of a logical fallacy. I would use Google Play to get like a top 3 so that you understand, you can test a lot of rounds of it. It's very fast, it's very iterative. And then once you have 1, 2, or 3 icons that you're really confident in that seem to be performing better, then I would put those in your iOS build and test again with your App Store traffic, just to be safe. The user behaviors between iOS users and Android users can be pretty different. I'm sure all of you have internal metrics about who's monetizing better, where you can get more UA scale, things like that. And it's the same thing with the stores, really. You can't take for granted that they're going to be the same because they're just not. And understanding their differences can be really powerful when you know how to test every little thing separately. My personal passion. Let's see, any other questions? What's your thought on introducing metadata updates, such as rolling out a swap test using the A/B capability on iOS, i.e. skipping the build release with an A/B test review? That is sneaky. I love that. That's sort of an interesting workaround. Huh. I had not honestly thought about that. I think you're going to change my life in this moment. Thank you for that. So let me just make sure I understand what you're talking about. So because the product page optimization page allows you to apply a variant without updating the build, and it goes out to the live version of the app, you could set up an A/B test with the things that you want changed and then immediately send it live through the product page optimization framework. Okay, you've really blown my mind here. I love this idea. I think that's fabulous. And that is a great workaround for one of the things that I thought was a pitfall of swap testing on the App Store. If you can reverse without having to release a second build, that would be fabulous. I wish there was something like that for metadata updates too. That would be just so powerful. Lovely. Thank you for that. Now I feel like I want to wrap this up early so that I can go play around. No, I'm just kidding. That's fine. But it's a great question, and you know your stuff. I'm very impressed. Thank you for that. I think that would be a really good solution for a lot of folks who don't have the support from their product and testing teams and their dev teams for stuff like this. I think that's great. Let's see, have the moderator sent me any more questions? Well, I'm not seeing anything. We've only got 4 minutes left anyway, so I guess I will wrap this up. Thank you all so much for attending, either live as it's happening with your incredible questions, or, you know, if you're watching this on replay, thank you so much for signing up and watching this replay. I really, really hope that this was just super impactful for you, that you learned a lot, and that even if all of this is old news to you, it at least got your brain thinking about why these things are, you know, best practices that we may take for granted, or maybe there's a new method of A/B testing that you want to try, or maybe I mentioned a pet peeve that you just realized you've been doing for years, and this is going to completely overhaul your ASO strategy. I can only hope. Anyway, thank you so much. This has been my very first webinar, and thank you for being a part of it. And please do reach out to me, Elizabeth Devine, at apptweak.com, elizabeth.devine at apptweak.com. If you have any questions, I'm happy to set you up with anybody on my team who can answer them if I'm not the one. There is a link that is going around. Thank you for the moderators who just put my stuff in there. You can also add me on LinkedIn, wherever you feel most comfortable conversing. Let's talk about ASO. Let's talk about what will take your game to the next level of store performance. And if you haven't already tried out AppTweak, please do request a demo. We can give you access to some of the features and have somebody go over best practices, how to use it. It's seriously super powerful. And I know I'm biased, but I did literally do what you all are doing and then come here so that I could work with this tool more, because it is so good. So yes, thank you all again so much. And I'm going to give you back 2 minutes of your lives, and I hope we'll keep in touch. Thanks so much. Bye.